it going? This is a video I make in just completely indescribable state of sadness. Not a human being that can be described in a one-sentence blurb. And so that's what I'm making this video to do. I want future generations to be able to see this and know just what kind of a person Stan Lee was. My childhood was characterized by hurt in some pretty extreme ways. My first memory, actually, of moving to Ohio when I was 7 years old. During recess, a group of white boys, even though these kids did not know me at all, let alone had a single conversation with me, the four of them chased me around the playground to try and eventually be able to catch me and beat me up because I was Mexican in a town that hated immigrants. Growing up, I was not a person, I was a disease. They hated, I don't know. It doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't, and it never will. What they did to me no longer affects who I am as a person. I'm who I am, and if they don't like it, they fuck off. And I owe that largely to the works of Stan Lee. I mean, the compassion he communicated through his work was... I mean, take a look at a work like X-Men, a work where he shows, in a time where this view is highly incorrect in society, you see him saying people who are different, the X-Men being symbolic of other races, many of them are of diverse races from all over the world, to help symbolize this idea, were hated by society because they were genetic mutations who had superpowers and were taking away our American jobs. Hatred of them for something they completely cannot control it spoke to me very deeply. I myself am a Mexican. That's something I can't control. My people can't control the fact they're Mexican. They can't control the fact that their home country is overrun by the greatest income inequality of any country ever. They cannot control the fact that the top 10% make over 40% of the entire country's income. They cannot control that almost 50% of their population is below their country's poverty line. They cannot control that if they don't want them and their children to die by either the hands of being malnourished or by drug cartels, the only option is to come to the United States seeking political asylum. And yet, they are hated for that uncontrollable fact. And Stan Lee, in his work, said, let's not hate people for things they can't control. Let's not hate people for being different. Let's celebrate that they're different. Let's celebrate that they're unique. Heck, you had Black Panther, who was legit like the first black superhero, mainstream-wise, just about ever. But he was just an employee at Marvel when the original Captain America comics were written. And along with Jack Kirby, he came up with the idea, when it was extremely unpopular, might I add, to have Captain America punching Adolf Hitler on the first ever cover of Captain America comics. This did not blow over well in the media. No, we forget in this day and age that in the 1940s, America was pro-Hitler. He was segregating the different groups from everybody else. And they were like, oh, what a great idea. And you know what Stan Lee said? He said, fuck that. With that comic book cover, he said, no, I will not tolerate hatred and division. You take works like X-Men in a time where in the media, Malcolm X was shown as hating white people. That's false.
You have called for self-defense units, rifle clubs, ready to execute on the spot those who threaten Negroes.
I don't think that I said that.
Yes, you did.
No, I don't think I said that.
He was depicted as hating white people, as hoping to promote black dominance over the white race, which was such bullshit. And surprisingly, this bullshit has in some ways endured To this day, people still believe this myth. There are even stories that he possibly named Professor X, the leader of the X-Men, after Malcolm X, to show how much he was in support of the black civil rights groups. In a time where this was considered politically incorrect, might I add, even just for talking about such serious issues and subject matter through comic books, he was considered a crazy, stupid radical. He knew they didn't like that. He didn't give a f. That was one of the big things that inspired me to become a writer. The opportunity to show the world as I have perceived it. You know, my Facebook bio up there literally says, my job is not to protect you from the truth, it is to tell you the truth. Honestly, I owe knowledge of what compassion is largely to having read his work, of fights against cruelty in the world, justice as the combat against cruelty. You know, Stan Lee attained such a mythical status that I think people can sort of forget the fact that he wasn't always perceived that way. For actually majority of his life, I would say he was perceived in a very negative light because he touched on such controversial views in such compassionate ways, and because he was writing comic books with such grandeur and sophistication when the medium was largely seen as a stupid, idiotic, worthless thing by every other artist active. This negative view of him amongst fellow artists is kind of still held today. And I just want to say to people who say things like, there's no merit to comic books, there's no merit to what they say, they don't say anything meaningful, they don't teach anything meaningful. You. Terry Gilliam, you're one of my favorite directors, but you can f*** off. You said comic book films have no real value, they're all trash, they should stop making them. F*** you. I don't care if you're one of the most accomplished directors and screenwriters of all time. It doesn't give you a right to shit on another human being's perspective just because it is different than your own. I like your work, but f*** you. You can certainly say that about some comic book films, but not Marvel comic book films. You take a look at the whole idea of Iron Man, a guy who is basically our entire society today. He's this ignorant, selfish, self-absorbed person, and he's exposed to the consequences his actions have on people besides his own. I mean, you literally see him go to Afghanistan and see his weapons are being sold to terrorists, which is not too different than arms dealers now. And so he changes. He fights injustice rather than being the cause of injustice. I don't know about you, but that sounds pretty meaningful. A story like Captain America, their superpower serum, the generals want to give it to soldiers that have more kill count, where the scientist says, no, let's give it to Steve Rogers, the weakest person who has not a single kill to his name. What merits giving strength to the weak? And he says, it's his compassion. And compassion will become stronger and become the strongest force in this world. And people want to say it's meaningless. The whole idea of the Avengers is about conflicting philosophies coming together and rising above their differences because the world needs them to. Each one is different, but that is okay. That is what makes them remarkable. Come together and save the world because the world needs them to, rather than be divided and separated. And people want to say that's meaningless. I will fight you till I don't have a breath left in me if you say the works of Marvel or Stan Lee are meaningless, because they are not. I wish I could say that for all the compassion and love and that Stan Lee has shown the world, that he was repaid for it. Stan Lee, in his final days, was abused and hurt in some pretty extreme ways. As soon as his wife, Joan Lee, that he loved, never betrayed, till the day she died, passed away in 2017, you noticed this rather extreme change in him as a person after that happened. Even though he was 93 years old, acted like he was 7. He was so full of joy, and it was infectious. And then when she died, he became a 93-year-old man. I'm not going to go that much into detail with that because that's not what this video is about. I wish the compassion he gave the world could have been given back to him, because the world rejected his compassion. And he used to not care because he had love. The compassion of just that one person alone was enough to make him forget about the fact the rest of the world thought he was weird, thought he was bad or wrong or stupid. For me, he was that person. When the rest of the world despised me through his work, he was that person. And now that guy's gone. Stan Lee was not just a writer that influenced me, he was a hero that influenced me. I really don't know what else to say, because I feel like if I don't say anything else, he actually is gone. I know he can't see this, but if he did, if I could say words to him, to his face, to describe the, just to thank him, I would say, Stan, thank you for showing the world what compassion was, even though they didn't want to know what compassion was. Thank you for showing me what compassion was, because no one else wanted to show me what compassion was, what true, lasting compassion was. Nobody showed me that the injustice in the world could be fought rather than simply accepted without rebellion. I hope to fill the really large shoes you've left behind as a writer, and continue to profess what you profess so elegantly and beautifully of compassion. As I'm sure he himself would say if he were here. Farewell, true believers.
You know, I guess one person can make a difference. Enough said.
To end this video on a happier note, here are some of Stan Lee's best cameos in his films.
Tony, remember me?
Sure don't. Look great, Hef.
Milwaukee. A man drank one of those Guarana sodas. Guess it had a little more kick than he was looking for.
Wow.
Did it work?
My personal friend, Captain America. Captain America. Captain, that's your cue.
I thought he'd be taller.
Oh, man. I am so fired.
This was aged for 1,000 years.
The barrels built from the wreck of Grunhill's fleet is not meant for mortal men.
Neither was Omaha Beach, Blondie. Stop trying to scare us. Come on.
All right.
Excelsior.
But anyway, and Ignacio tells me, yo, I met this crazy fine writer chick at the spot last night. Like, fine, like crazy stupid fine. And he goes up to the bartender and goes, look at the girl I'm with. You know what I'm saying? She's crazy stupid fine, right? And the bartender's all like, yeah, crazy stupid fine.
Hey, coming onto our stage right now. Give it up for Chastity.
You okay?
Are you Tony Stank? Hey, fellas. Hey, wait, where are you going? Hey, you were supposed to be my lift home. How will I get out of here? Hey, gee, I've got so many more stories to tell. Guys. Oh, gee.